The Dinari ship Nogala. The Dinari ship. Nogala docked at Space Station 6 to take on a load of construction equipment and workers as passengers. The clients were a religious sect of Menics, an avian species. They took astrology to a whole new level, basing their colonization policies, laws, and trial outcomes on mystics who read messages in the stars, planets, moons, comets, and even some meteorites. Captain Voan, a large crab-like creature, motioned to the small mammal clerk who resembled an otter. "Purg, summon Oxidize. I will speak to him about his behavior regarding the Menics. I need to ensure that he does not offend." Purg held out a data tablet. "Captain, I anticipated your request and I have supplied Oxidize with all the necessary information regarding Menics culture and acceptable social interactions. Here's a copy of the information given." Voan placed the tablet into a console, scanning the information quickly with his 6 eyes. After a few moments, he spoke. Normally, this would be quite sufficient, but the human is unpredictable and problematic. In this case, direct verbal communication may be redundant, but it is probably necessary. Purg shuffled his data tablets. "Sir, given the frequent issues involving Oxidize, have you considered replacement with another human?" Voan gave a series of low clicks that sounded more like clunks, showing a degree of irritation. "The problem is that all humans are equally problematic. The key to using them effectively is to find one with the desired skill set, then monitor it to prevent danger or offensive communication." Purg clicked his own teeth. "Then perhaps we shouldn't have a human at all." Voan emitted several more clunks, punctuated with an almost scraping noise. Purg grew alarmed, realizing his impertinence. "Many apologies, Captain. I spoke shamefully. I do not question your decisions. I am simply unable to comprehend the nuances of the situation." Voan realized he was intimidating the small mammal. He paused, then purposefully just gave some quiet clicks, like when focused on a task. "Your confusion is inoffensive. Humans are enigmatic. However, when consensus is reached with such a bizarre creature involved, the outcome will be most favorable." Dinari believed in a democratic method of leadership. The main purpose of a leader was to keep order among group members so that the group could come to a consensus about policy. However, history had also proven that when a group did not have a diversity of ideas and values, consensus tended to favor policies that adhered to rigid philosophies and failed to address legitimate concerns of those who did not strictly adhere to the rigid philosophy. For this reason, Dinari leaders would try to include diverse members into their organizations, even though sometimes friction and frustration resulted. Humans were extremely diverse, both from other species and each other. Their contributions to consensus were extremely valuable, if one had endless patience to endure them. Purg bobbed his head in relief. "I shall fetch Oxidize immediately, Captain. What task would you like me to perform next?" Voan gave a sigh like a great bellows. "I must interact with Oxidize first, in order to assess necessary decisions." Purg left and went to the human's cabin. He activated the visitor alert and heard the human say, "Come in." Purg walked into the cabin. Oxidize was not in the entertainment or rest area, so Purg went back to the sanitation area. He stood in shock, staring at the strangest thing he had ever seen. The human was naked, except for a groin cover that wrapped around its body. Its body was mostly bald, with some light fuzz that would require several months to grow into decent fur. Previously, Purg had only seen the human fully clothed, which revealed its head and hands. Purg had seen the fur at the top and back of the human's head, along with the tiny tufts above its eyes. But now Purg saw almost the whole human, and it was just odd. The only other spots that had actual fur were where its arms were connected to its torso. The chest, arms, and legs of its body had the light fuzz, but its back, shoulders, ribs, and feet were completely bald. The feet of the creature were also oddly shaped, which was no surprise when looking at an alien. But its feet seemed to completely lack any sort of claws, heavy pads, or calluses to give traction for walking and running. Purg also noticed some designs that had been applied to its skin. Some were pictures, some were words, and some appeared to be mystic glyphs. But absolutely the most bizarre thing was that the human had started growing fur on its face, but was using some sort of tool to remove it. Perhaps it had some sort of skin infection that required medication to be applied directly to bald skin. The human stopped removing the fur from its head, wiped its face with a small cloth, and greeted his guest. "What's up, Purg?" Purg had learned that this question was not relevant to height, elevated objects, or even ceilings and sky, but actually an inquiry about the present situation. "The captain will speak to you on the bridge." Purg noticed that the human had removed only the fur that had started to grow on the lower half of its face. It had left the small tufts above its eyes intact. "Oxidize. May I ask you questions about your body?" The human gave a quick sigh and replied, "You can ask anything you want if you use my name, Rusty. Why is that so difficult?" Purg blinked. Perhaps one day the ship will have a more sophisticated AI that will translate into your specific dialect. Rusty sat at the edge of his bed and started getting dressed. Purg had always seen the human almost fully covered, wearing far more clothing than other crew members, and now he understood why. The poor bald creature must be freezing. As Purg watched Rusty getting dressed, the multiple clothing layers were unusual but understandable. "How did you lose so much fur? Were you exposed to radiation? Why do you remove fur? Are you scheduled for surgery that would require depilation? Are you aware that you did not remove the fur over your eyes? Was that intentional or an oversight? Are you sure your species is mammal?" Purg seemed to be exploding with questions, some a few bizarre, all of them fairly personal. Rusty didn't take offense because curiosity was natural when dealing with aliens. Also, Purg's people looked like otters and were only waist-high, so it was impossible to get offended at anything that cute. "Slow down, Purg, one at a time. Yes, humans are mammals. I have the normal amount of hair for a human. This is just how we look. The hair removal from my face is traditional. Leaving the eyebrows," Rusty pointed at the tiny fur spots, "is normal. Although occasionally one of the subcultures on my world will remove eyebrows also, but it looks weird if you ask me. Any more questions?" Rusty had put on socks, a work jumpsuit with several pockets, and boots that laced up. He had covered the lower half of his body and was selecting a t-shirt to put on under the jumpsuit top, and there was a belt to add also. Purg bobbed his head excitedly. To see an alien up close like this and willing to answer questions was quite exciting. Purg eagerly looked forward to dinner when he could share all this information with the rest of his people. "Are you usually cold? Does your kind have skin of different colors? What sort of environment is your natural habitat? Do your females have similar fur? Do your young have fur? What life stage are you in? It was assumed that you are an adult, but your fur is similar to an infant. Are you an adult or perhaps a juvenile? How long does your fur grow? Is this your summer or winter coat? Does your species wear so much clothing because you cannot grow enough fur? Or did you previously have more fur, but shed it because you wear clothing instead? Is there any fur under your groin covering? The markings on your skin appear to be artificial. Are they temporary or permanent? Are they religious or family markings? Do females have such markings?" Rusty chuckled. Purg was usually the calming influence in any situation, quiet, efficient, diplomatic, dependable, and proactive in a completely innocuous way. To see Purg so excited and animated was, well, adorable, like a boy watching a construction site. Some of the questions were a little surprising with their personal nature, but Purg was incapable of trying to be offensive. Rusty had to suppress the urge to pet Purg and give him a little scratch behind the ears. He answered Purg's questions while gathering a few assorted tools to put in his pockets. Females actually have less hair than males. Body hair is what you see. It doesn't get longer. The hair on our heads and faces can get quite long, over half a meter. Yes, our hair loses color as we age. Yes, I am an adult. Sometimes I get cold. He glanced at the chronometer. "Didn't you say the captain was looking for me?" Purg glanced at the chronometer as well. "Ah, yes, you are correct. But may I ask one more question?" Rusty smiled. "Shoot, Purg." Purg was momentarily puzzled. Often the human said things that made no sense and sometimes sounded potentially hostile, but clearly weren't. The easiest way to deal with this was to simply ignore the odd thing. "May I touch your fur?" Rusty's eyebrows lifted in surprise. He sat on the edge of his bed so Purg could reach his hair. "Sure, go ahead." Rusty was even more surprised when Purg reached out his paw and stuck it into Rusty's armpit, wiggling his digits in the hair. Rusty flinched and laughed from the tickling. Purg then quickly touched Rusty's shoulder where there was no hair, but some of the decorative marking. It didn't rub off, so it appeared to be permanent. Rusty finished dressing quickly, answering a couple more questions. Purg had produced a data tablet and was rapidly tapping away. Purg seemed to have an endless supply of data tablets, and always a tablet with useful information no matter what the situation. As Purg and Rusty walked to the bridge, Rusty answered a few more questions, with Purg tapping away non-stop. When Rusty and Purg got to the bridge, Captain Voan and the rest of the bridge crew turned to stare at them, or more specifically, Rusty. There were endless rumors and speculations about humans, and Rusty was no exception. Some rumors had been proven, some disproven. The one thing that was consistent is that the human was guaranteed to say or do something bizarre. Oxidize. Purg has given you information regarding proper behavior for the Menix. Is there any part of that information that is difficult to comprehend or objectionable to apply? Rusty shrugged. Seems pretty straightforward. My sister is into all that astrology mumbo-jumbo, so I've just learned to smile and nod. Rusty glanced around the bridge, looking out of the corner of his eyes. It seemed like the other crew members always stared at him, like they expected him to perform tricks. Voan chittered approvingly. It is agreeable that we have reached consensus so easily. I was unaware that humans practiced astrology. It is most fortunate that your own family has this religious preference and finds it so agreeable. That's not what Rusty meant. Well, that is sure, Voan. Why not? Tell you what, I'm going down to the loading bay. Let me know if you need anything. He went down to the loading bay and storerooms, double-checking empty cargo space and safety devices. He was not looking forward to this. Weird aliens were one thing, but the supreme asshole at Space Station 6, SAS-6, was something else entirely. That's what Rusty called the Shuttle coordinator there. Rusty had been a Terra Marine, and SAS-6 was also a human military veteran, the Space Force. Terra Marines saw the Space Force as pampered, soft, coddled, and entitled, with zero common sense. Space Force considered Terra morons to be lower-evolved humans, licking paint off walls, fighting like toddlers, and occupying themselves by picking their noses and butts, usually with the same finger. The only thing that Rusty and SAS-6 agreed on is that any civilian who ever dared to insult any part of the military deserved the full wrath of all military members in the immediate vicinity. Rusty had an ongoing dispute with SAS-6. As the Shuttle coordinator, fancy title for sitting around watching other people work, Rusty thought. SAS-6 thought he should determine which order that cargo loads would be sent to ships. The problem with that is depending on the configuration and equipment of the receiving ship. That could be anything from a minor inconvenience to an expensive disaster. Things need to be unloaded a certain way, and that way wasn't dictated by the laziness and ego of a desk jockey. Once the Nogala docked with Station 6, Rusty went with the Captain Purg, the contracts and currency specialist, and the medical specialist to meet the Menix. The Nogala had never transported Menix before, so a review of their allergens and potentially communicable infections was in order, following standard galactic policy. There had been countless attempts to organize a database to replace the screening protocol, but with so many creatures interacting with other creatures in a variety of environments, a comprehensive database was basically impossible. As it stood, such databases were considered rudimentary guidelines, but a review by a medical specialist was still the best process. The Nogala crew, the Menix representatives, and employees of Station 6 all met in the transport area next to where the Menix equipment and supplies were going to be loaded into shuttles. SAS-6 was there with the other station employees. He and Rusty gave each other hard stares, neither blinking. The Menix acknowledged the station crew first, with their conversation being mostly a formal goodbye. May you find fortuitous omens and a clear path in the stars. The leader of the station crew fumbled his way through a polite response. Good luck and be safe. The Menix gave each other quiet, awkward stares. Then they went to greet the Nogala crew. We look forward to this intersection of our life paths. Purg tapped away on his data tablet, trying to find a culturally acceptable response. The Menics started to give each other the same awkward stares. Rusty was impatient to get started, especially with SAS-6 giving him the evil eye, so he just blurted the first thing that came to him. Happy birthday." His sister, the astrology nut, was always going on and on about how when you were born supposedly dictated your whole life and personality. The Menics chirped pleasantly and tapped their toenails on the floor. Their leader quickly approved the work agreement from the contract and currency specialist, barely glancing at it. Voan perceived that Oxidize, in his usual bizarre manner, had somehow utterly charmed the Menics. He chittered approvingly. The loading work was the usual pain in the ass working with SAS-6. Rusty gave clear, simple instructions about the order the cargo was to be sent. SAS-6 seemed determined to do everything in the most ass-backwards way possible. When the dinner break came around, Rusty was grouchy as hell. Voan came to where Rusty was eating. "Oxidize, I require your opinion. I have been asked to give contributions to achieve consensus about the worlds in the Quanit system." Rusty frowned a moment. "Isn't that the territory that the Dinari and Unla are always fighting over? I don't know a lot more than that. What's on your mind?" Voan quietly rubbed a couple of small forward appendages together. "My government tires of the unending conflict. Achieving consensus with the Unla seems impossible. Therefore, we are looking for alternative means to secure our worlds once and for all." Rusty continued eating and gave him a puzzled look. "Okay, and?" Voan continued. "One suggestion is to enlist the aid of other species to secure the worlds, in exchange for extremely favorable trade agreements. Do you think that Earth would accept such a proposal?" Rusty stopped eating and gave Voan a wide-eyed stare. Then he spoke slowly. "Do not involve my people in your conflict. You would be better off permanently surrendering ownership of those worlds than getting Earth involved. Trust me on this. We have a saying, everything in moderation. The truth is that humans do nothing in moderation, especially war. I'm telling you, I'm begging you, leave Earth out of it." Voan gave a long series of clicks, then finally responded, "Your opinion shall be fully considered." Voan returned to the bridge and settled into a contemplative posture. He compared the responses of Oxidize as well as the human shuttle coordinator at Station 6. Their responses were exceptionally valuable. They had strong animosity towards each other, and they would exude hostility pheromones just hearing each other's names. Voan speculated that they may be from warring tribes. However, the other human, the station shuttle coordinator, had been in complete consensus regarding asking Earth for assistance. Man, getting Earth involved is a bad idea. Not just a bad idea, but the worst idea in the history of bad ideas. There were other human crew members on the Nogala who had similar responses. "Do you want an apocalypse? Because that's how you get an apocalypse. Obviously, you've never read any of our history books, or you wouldn't even ask. Don't, just don't. I promise you, just don't. We have a saying on Earth, fuck around and find out. If Earth fucks around, you'll find out." Voan, to achieve a more expansive consensus, decided to consult the Menics as well. Due to their religious beliefs, they would have a very unique perspective. The crew was performing efficiently, so there would be no immediate need for his mediation. He went to go speak to the Menics, who were collecting their people and personal effects from the station. When he went to one of the returning shuttles, he was surprised to see Rusty in one of the seats. Voan could detect some hostility pheromones mixed in with perspiration from the day's labor. Rusty glanced up. "Hey, Voan, I'm going over because I need to see for myself what's coming. That idiot shuttle coordinator seems incapable of giving a straight answer or following simple instructions." Voan gave a few clunks, then finally replied, "Do what is necessary to achieve consensus. There are to be no delays in our departure. The Menics have dictated the schedule according to their beliefs, and compensation will be affected by how well Nogala adheres to the schedule." Rusty gave a curt nod. Voan grew uneasy. While personally assessing the remaining cargo was a sensible idea, the potential for conflict between Oxidize and the shuttle coordinator was exceptionally high. Before the shuttle could lift off, Voan issued orders. "Shuttle pilot, inform the Menics that I wish for an immediate audience upon our arrival. Tell the Nogala bridge to summon Perg and Manj to this shuttle. We will depart immediately when they board. Oxidize, you will be accompanied by Manj and Perg while on the station." Rusty gave a frustrated sigh which Voan ignored. Monge was the contracts and currency specialist and might be able to provide Rusty with some advice. As for Purg, Voan had noticed an interesting social pattern with mammals. Larger mammals found the presence of smaller mammals to be enjoyable, often making them more agreeable. Voan speculated that perhaps larger mammals unconsciously viewed smaller mammals as offspring, explaining why their demeanor would be gentler and even protective towards smaller mammals. While Purg would not have any professional relevance, perhaps his presence could provide emotional soothing that would de-escalate interaction between Oxidize and the Shuttle coordinator. Oxidize seemed to be particularly agreeable towards Purg. Purg, Monge, and 3 of her husbands boarded the shuttle. Monge was an arachnid, meaning polyandry, lots of polyandry. Wherever Monge was, at least 2 of her husbands would be also, constantly kowtowing, hoping to be the next selected mate. It was beyond weird to Rusty. Mange, being female, easily towered over her husbands. They were in constant cooperative competition with each other, hoping to be chosen for mating. Being chosen, though, was literally the worst prize ever. During mating, she would kill the husband and weave him into a preservation web so that when his offspring hatched, they could eat him. Their species saw it as an honor, that their legacy was fathering and nourishing the next generation. To Rusty, it was a freaking nightmare. But he also knew a few guys who had been through some nasty divorces that would probably prefer this. On the station, the interaction between Rusty and the shuttle coordinator was as bad as everyone feared. Aggression hormones were pungent, shouted profanities and insults echoed off the walls, and there were even assorted threats involving various gestures, such as when Rusty held up the middle phalange of each hand up to the shuttle coordinator's office where the coordinator was barking orders over the general intercom to the loading area. Of course, this was the precise moment that Voan and the Menix representatives came to the loading area. An intimidated forklift operator turned suddenly with his cargo. A wheel of his vehicle caught the side of a shuttle ramp instead of up the smooth incline of the ramp. The forklift tipped on its side, damaging the battery that supplied the magnetic restraining clamps. Large cargo barrels spilled off the cargo platform. Rusty saw one of Mange's husbands standing dangerously close, frozen in fear. Corporal Robert Rusty Hauser, United Earth Terra Marines, sprang into action. The lights were super bright but focused. Some noises were overwhelmingly loud while others were silenced. His heart pounded impossibly fast. He began sweating, and his body was running, moving, jumping before he could tell it what to do. Time flashed in an instant at an excruciatingly slow speed. 95% of his brain shut down, and what little was active was his training, which took over everything. He ran over to the husband, getting hit and knocked down by heavy barrels, but immediately scrambling to his feet to continue running. He was aware of incredible pain down his left side and another in his lower right leg and foot. He reached the husband and grabbed and flung him toward Monge. He heard a scream. The forklift operator was trapped in the fallen vehicle. He ran over to the forklift, wiping sweat from his eyes, which turned out to be blood. He was vaguely aware of alarms going off in the loading bay with shouted orders coming over the intercom. He gave a screaming shout as he lifted the side of the forklift cage up so others could pull the operator to safety. The scream was because his side hurt so badly he thought he would vomit. He was vaguely aware of broken ribs. His hands were slick with the blood from his face as he shouted at the others, rescuing the operator to hurry. He tightened his grip, feeling his hands distend with metal cutting into his flesh. He was still losing his grip and shifted to try to hold it a few seconds longer, because the operator's harness was caught. As he shifted, he became aware that the voice over the intercom was shouting, "Live wire!" Corporal Hauser screamed louder as electricity shot through his body, exploding in pain. He was going to be damned if he let go. The devil himself with legions of hellfire could come to beat him with red-hot pokers, and he wasn't going to let a man die, not after Blood River. The others finally got the operator out of the forklift. Corporal Hauser saw a lower appendage and the tail of the operator had been crushed. As he dropped the forklift and hobbled over to the operator, he shouted, "Corpsman, on deck now!" As he looked over the operator, he noticed a large gash bleeding profusely, and firmly pressed a bloody hand, applying direct pressure to the wound. Emergency medical specialists surrounded them. One pulled him off the operator, shouting questions at him. He saw where Voan, Mange, and Purg were standing. He stood up to walk over to them with incredible pain in his right shin and ankle. Purg scurried to him, looking alarmed. Even though the pain in his left side was so bad that he couldn't breathe, he said to Purg reassuringly, "It's going to be okay." He took 2 steps, then his eyes rolled up in the back of his head, and Corporal Hauser, decorated hero of Blood River, collapsed, his body hitting the deck with a sickening thud. Purg went to visit Rusty in the ship's medical center. As usual, he had a handful of data tablets. One had more questions and notes about Rusty's fur. One had the results of the various investigations of the accident, which were all good news. There were a few others, including an after-action report from the medics. Purg anticipated that Rusty might be displeased by the report. Rusty was now laying in a bed, well enough that he no longer needed to be immersed in a gel tank. When creatures sustained severe injuries to the support structures of their body, exoskeleton plates or endoskeleton bones, the gel would support the weight of the body, taking pressure off damaged areas trying to heal. Only one sustenance feeder was still connected to Rusty. Since Rusty had regained basic functions, he could eat to nourish himself as normal, and the sustenance feeder was now delivering only the concentrated nutrients needed to facilitate healing. Purg marveled at his large crewmate. Not only had the human miraculously survived lethal injuries that had been aggravated by incredible actions made possible by human combat hormones, but he was healing at a phenomenal rate. Even with medical gel and specialized sustenance feeding, Rusty's recovery was still astounding. Crew members were constantly trying to solicit gossip from the medical specialist about Rusty's recovery. It was commonly speculated that Rusty was probably genetically enhanced, but the medical specialist had scanned Rusty repeatedly using different techniques, and his DNA was unaltered. Rusty was lightly dozing. The medical specialist had reported that Rusty seemed especially skilled at sleeping. The human could rest comfortably regardless of bright illumination or intermittent noise. The one exception was if Rusty's entertainment monitor was switched off. Rusty insisted that it be active at all times. He could be in deep REM sleep, and if a medical attendant turned it off, Rusty would immediately awaken and object. "Hey, I was watching that." Even when it was pointed out that the growl barking noises Rusty made during deep sleep were much louder than the monitor, Rusty still stubbornly insisted on keeping the monitor on. Rusty seemed to sense Purg's approach because he woke up and groggily greeted Purg. "Hey, little buddy, what's up?" Rusty reached over and gently petted Purg's head and gave him a little scritch behind the ear. Purg found it unusual but a bit soothing. It reminded him of the way his mother had groomed him. It was amazing that this powerful creature could touch so gently. Rusty's hand dropped. "Sorry if that was inappropriate. The drugs Doc has me on got me feeling good." Purg nodded understandingly. "The touch was unexpected but quite inoffensive. You've always been respectful in your way, and medical narcotics usually produce unusual behavior." Rusty chuckled. "Good, we are still square. So what can I do for you, Purg?" Purg held up 2 data tablets. "The accident has been formally reviewed, and no fault was found on the part of the Nogala or crew. There will be no disciplinary procedures or documentation. In spite of damage to the Menix property, you will receive full compensation for the work." Rusty gave a brief smile. He let his head fall back to his pillow. "Cool." Purg ignored the reply. Another nonsensical human utterance, but it seemed to be favorable. "Captain Voan has spoken at length with the station owner. They agreed that you and the shuttle coordinator are simply incapable of reaching a consensus. Therefore, there will be an intermediary between you in all situations going forward. This may provide a slight inconvenience, as it was determined that besides working separately, you will also take rest, entertainment, and meals separately." Rusty snorted. It was almost insulting that he was being treated like a toddler who wouldn't keep his hands to himself. But at least he was getting full pay for this job and wouldn't have to deal with SAS 6 anymore. Purg held out a data tablet that had pictures of a few various monkeys. "I have more questions about your species, so I did some research. It seems that your scientific community thinks that you naturally evolved from these creatures. I believe they are mistaken. Given the differences between humans and these other species, there is no way your people came from these animals without some sort of intervention. I believe that there was an early common ancestor, but an unknown outside entity began experimenting and accelerating evolution to develop different descendant species until humans were created. Then you were left alone for whatever reason." Rusty chuckled. "Purg, I think you are the first person to ever prove the existence of God by believing in evolution. Usually it's the other way around." Rusty was impressed. Purg was a master of research, able to find just about any given piece of information. He was also so darn cute that you would answer any question without hesitation. Rusty asked, "How much longer until we hit our destination? The doc is a worrywart and says I'll still be on bed rest. I might not be 100%, but I can at least operate a loader and help direct traffic." Purg hesitated, shuffling his data pads. "Purg?" Purg sighed, then spoke. "We will be meeting with the Balin, Captain Voran's ship, in 9 days. You will remain aboard the ship until it docks at Space Station 9. After the Nogala has delivered the Menix supplies and personnel, we will rendezvous at the station, where you will be reintegrated with the crew." Rusty was baffled. "What? Why?" Purg took a deep breath. "While the Menix were very impressed and appreciative of your actions during the accident, they were also quite frightened. There are rumors regarding human aggression and combat abilities. After extensive discussion, the Menix have decided that humans are banned from their system for safety reasons." Rusty was in shock, but only for a moment. "Are you fucking shitting me?" Purg gave a small nervous squeak. Rusty took a few breaths, calming himself. "I'm sorry, Purg. That wasn't directed towards you. I just can't believe they would do that. I mean, this is insane. Is it because the others got hurt?" Purg spoke to him reassuringly and held out a data pad with the accident investigation report. "Definitely not. Manja's husband suffered only superficial injuries that he has already recovered from. The forklift operator definitely would have died or suffered completely debilitating injuries without your assistance. Your actions undoubtedly prevented further injuries and property damage. It's just that, after seeing humans in a full rage, then far exceeding normal performance limitations with debilitating injuries due to your combat aggression hormones, the Menix are alarmed at the potential for disaster if humans are allowed in their system." Rusty just stared at Purg in shock, just blinking. Purg had never seen such aggressive blinking. Purg never would have imagined that such an action could exist, to blink and stare in such a way that it made another nervous. He continued, "This is not as unusual as you might think. There are other such bans in effect, usually between warring species or carriers of infection. And I have identified 8 other worlds that have banned humans. I compiled this list for your reference." Purg held out a tablet. When Rusty didn't take it but just sat there blinking, Purg put it next to the entertainment monitor. Rusty finally spoke. "So I saved 2 guys, prevented damage to cargo, got my ass royally kicked in the process, and the thank you is to banish my entire species. I'm not sure if I should be flattered or insulted." Purg thought a moment. "I think flattered. I spoke with Manj. After seeing what you did, she said that if you were the correct species, you would absolutely be her first choice to mate." Rusty did a double take and his eyes crossed slightly for a moment. It seemed that no matter how weird the universe got, it could always get weirder.